Hello, Omar. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the interview today.
Hi, Aram. It's a pleasure to be here.
Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Omar Zahr. I'm the Director of Technology at TandemLaunch. TandemLaunch is a venture capital fund that has a startup foundry model. We build companies based on university IP.
What lab were you part of when you were at McGill, and when did you graduate?
So when did I graduate? That would be 2015. I worked at Professor Amy Blum's lab in the Department of Chemistry. My research area there was, we were focusing on using virus proteins as templates for the self-assembly of new materials, specifically metamaterials, optical metamaterials.
After your bachelor's at McGill, why did you choose to stay for your PhD?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess maybe the question before that was, why did I choose to do a bachelor's in chemistry? At the time, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So the calculus was I should pick a physical science or something that would set me up for it. And then in the course of doing my undergrad, I realized that I really didn't have the temperament to go into pre-med or to be a doctor. So I sort of fumbled around a bit trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And luckily, I ended up choosing to do an honors chemistry option and got to do a bit of research in Professor Carino Flair's lab and really learned that I really enjoyed research. And so that's ultimately what led me to decide to do the PhD.
Were there any times you felt like you don't know what to do after grad school?
Oh yeah, all the time, constantly. Actually, I think maybe it's also one of the consequences of not being involved in much outside of my research is that it also doesn't really expose you to a lot of experiences that inform what you might want to do afterwards.
What did you do after graduating from McGill?
So I joined TandemLaunch pretty soon after I graduated. I was lucky enough, I'd been hunting around for industry research jobs, interviewed a couple of places. But soon after submitting my thesis, I reconnected with an old colleague who used to be at the chemistry department who had joined TandemLaunch as an entrepreneur. And so through a conversation there, I was sort of drawn into speaking to a couple of people at TandemLaunch, and that really just led one thing into another to a job at TandemLaunch itself.
How was the transition from research into entrepreneurship?
Well, that transition was, I guess, easy and difficult at the same time. It was easy in that a lot of the process of our scouting for inventions and devising ideas for companies is in many ways a research process. You're still applying the same skill set, especially when you're scouting university technology. It's a lot of paper reading and such. The harder part was ultimately being in an environment where you're being held to your output. You know, it's a place where the method at which you get to a result doesn't matter as much as you getting the result itself. And that's very different from the academic sphere, where it's a bit more of an exploratory. It's more exploratory, right? Like you might not get the results you intended in your experiments or what have you, and that's okay. That in itself is a result, but a very different environment from an entrepreneurial one where you just need to get there, regardless of how you do it. You need to get there and you need to do it quickly and efficiently.
What is the best thing about working in venture development and a startup?
I think a lot of people take different things from it. The best thing for me was that there's a very clear line between what you're doing and the impact it's making on the company. It's really easy to draw that connection, and that can be very energizing. Whereas a large company, there's multiple layers, you can't easily draw that connection. It's also an immensely creative process because a lot of the problems you're solving, you don't have a lot of precedent for out in the world. And so you spend a lot of time devising solutions to very unique contexts. And that can be massively satisfying when it actually works out, right? And there's a lot of failure along the way, sure, but that just makes the satisfaction better when you get there. And also, I guess the sense of ownership you have over the results is really big too, which is in one part terrifying, but also really, really exciting because you're the only person accountable, and that can be very satisfying as well.
What skills have been vital to lead up to your current position?
Well, none of my experimental skills, but those skills would probably have left a lot to be desired anyway. So people are pretty lucky not to have to be exposed to my experimental skills. But the scientific mindset certainly helps. I mean, it helps in virtually every application, right? It really is the most effective way to get at truth. So having that and having practiced it for a long time is a really big asset. I think also on some level, there's something about working tirelessly towards a thesis that develops a sense of grit that can also be really, really useful. Some of the most high impact stuff that you do occurs after chipping away at something over and over and over again for a really long time. It's not always the case that big actions result in big rewards. It's often small actions building up over time, gaining momentum that get you there. And so you really need grit to get across the line. And so I think that's certainly helped me along the way.
So what piece of advice would you give to grad students who are seeking jobs outside of academia?
There's one main piece of advice, which is go out and talk to people. The one thing, well, something that I learned, and I think I see this a lot in a lot of people that went through the same transition, is that often you don't really know what you want. I mean, you kind of maybe have some inkling of where you'd like to end up, but you don't really know, and you don't really know what these jobs entail, and you don't know anyone in them. So going out and talking to people is really the most effective way of doing it, and really it's as easy as connecting cold with someone on LinkedIn that's doing something that you think is interesting, and then inviting them to a coffee, I guess before the world ended, but now, a Zoom meeting or something. But that sort of thing, and it's not weird. And the fact is that it's at least what I discovered after the fact was that this is something that people do for each other all the time, and that it's entirely socially acceptable to just reach out to someone you don't know and just ask them to talk about their jobs and talk about their companies. And in many cases, it's also the most effective way to start getting opportunities at those places or in those kinds of jobs as well.
Thank you for a great interview, Omar. Looking forward to seeing you at the conference.
Looking forward to it as well. Thank you, Yoram.